Hello students, I am back with another poem of Derek Walcott, The Ruins of a Great House. As we have seen in the previous class, the introduction to the poet and his cultural and traditional background, I am not going into it. We will straight away go to the poem. This poem compared to that of his other poems are a little difficult. That's why I thought of going with the recorded version. Actually, the difficulty being the lines are very abrupt. They end abruptly and they run into one another, leaving us in confusion where to connect and how to connect. And the reference to a number of writers that he admired comes also in between. And it's a bit difficult unless you read it 2 or 3 times, it's very difficult to understand the poem. So even when you watch the video once, you may not follow every line. So I would request you to take some more pain and watch it one more time so that you will understand every line of it. The thought is clear, but reading of the poem is a bit difficult, which I hope you will understand through this PowerPoint presentation. So let me share the slides with you. Here we go. So it takes time to share. Just a few minutes. Okay, here it comes. This is a image that I have given to symbolically represent the great house, and it is in ruin. So this particular poem was written in 1956, and it was published in his one of the record creating book In a Green Light, which was published in the year 1962. Written in 56 but published in 62, and it captures, as in the other poems. For example, we have learned the poem Far Cry from Africa, which talks about his binary state of mind, his dichotomy, which side to talk about. This also talks about the binary state of mind of the poet, not able to choose the one side because he is of a mixed blood. And this particular poem should be understood at the background of a slave trade that was prevalent at that time, and his hatred or his disapproval for the particular slave trade being encouraged by his white master forms the basic of the poem. So this traces the tension that arises between the master and the slave, and he talks, which he thinks is the reason behind the ruining of the house. Now, to understand more about the poem, we should find out his ambivalence, his mixed feelings for the particular master and his country, Great Britain. And the reference, as I have already mentioned, is the 18th and 19th century when slave trade was flourishing. And many of the plantations of the Britain was functioning with the help of the slaves. And that could be seen in the background of the poem. And he's repelled, the poet feels repelled toward this particular characteristics of the British in treating the slaves very badly, in the very bad treatment and the cruel treatment of the slaves finds expression in this particular poem. But still, he had to support them. Towards the end of the poem, we find him taking a compassionate attitude towards his English masters because he loves the tongue, the English language better, and that could be understood from the references that he makes to the different English writers that he makes throughout the poem. Throws light on the fact how much he loves the English language and the writers, which makes him take a compassionate attitude towards the Britishers. So with this understanding only, you have to approach the poem. That will make the reading a bit easier one. And now we go to the poem, which begins with the epigraph. It starts with the quotation of Thomas Browne, which comes in Urn Burial. Though our longest sun sets at right declensions and makes but winter arches, it cannot be long before we lie down in darkness and have our light in ashes. So here the reference is to that of the prose treatise written by Urn Burial. Written by Thomas Browne. He wrote soon after the war. When England was suffering a huge loss, the human loss was experienced due to the war, the fire, the plague. All those were creating so much havoc in the British society. He wrote this particular prose treatise called Urn Burial, and the reference here is to the number of the vast death that it invited due to this natural as well as the man-made disasters, and human bodies were burnt and the ashes were there was no enough burial ground to bury them. So what happened? They were burnt and the ashes were collected and kept in the urns. So the reference is to that urn burial. Buried bodies were kept in the ashes, and that talks about how the British colonization is coming to an end. Great Britain is said to be a land of never setting sun. Hope you are all aware of that. Right? And so the long setting sun is coming to its setting position. It's going to set, and darkness is going to engulf the British Empire. That is the reference that he makes. So with this epigraph that he begins his poem. I told you epigraph is a quotation that comes in the beginning, and this is a quotation from Thomas Brown's Urn Burial, where the fall of British Empire has been hinted at. So he begins it with that, and we move to the original lines of the poet. Stones only, the dejecta member of this great house, whose moth-like girls are mixed with candle dust, remain to file the lizard's dragonish claws. So he, the first 10, not only these lines, the first 10 lines takes the reader along the ruined mansion. So we are walking along with the poet, and we are shown the dilapidated parts, the ruined parts of the house, and you could see the stone being scattered all around. The dejecta membra is actually in Latin means the dejected part or the scattered parts. So the reference here is to Horace Walpole's Ars Poetica, where he is talking about the dejecta membra poetae, limbs of the dismembered poet. So maybe that influenced him to use this term dejecta membra. I told you it's a Latin term that stands for the scattered stone pieces. So when we walk along with the poet along the British mansion, actually the great house stands for the British Empire. You have to remember that's a metaphor that stands for the British Empire. And we walk along, you could find the ruined parts of the empire being, the house being thrown apart, scattered apart. And he takes us inside the house, which was once inhabited by the girls, moth-like girls. The girls have been called moth-like because they were always seen around. I mean, electricity wouldn't be there at that time, and they used to have the candlelight. So the girls could always be seen around the candlelight, just like moths who were also seen around the lights. But when you get in now, you could find there were no moths, there were no candles, there were no girls. Everyone has been turned to ashes. Just like the candle produces ashes and dies down, the girls have died down, and the moths have also died down. So everything is very short-lived, and you could find only ashes inside. So everything had been destroyed, destructed, and what remains is only the lizard. This lizard, which looks like a dragon, huge lizards now occupy the ruined mansion, heightening the ruin that the British Empire has undergone. Only it is inhabited by the beastly things, beastly and useless things like the lizard. That has been referred in these lines. So we move on. From the house, we are taken to the gate, where the mouths of those gate cherubs shrieked with stain. Axle and coach wheels silted under the muck of cattle droppings. So when you come outside the house, inside the house, you found the once it was inhabited by the girls, no more. Now only ashes remained and lizards. Now he comes out and he looks at the gate, and there you could find the cherubs pictures being engraved on the grills. The iron grills have the images of the cherubs. Maybe the reference is to that of the Garden of Eden, which were guarded by the angels. So here, the British mansion, the colonization was once like a paradise, thriving and beaming with happiness, and it is guarded by the cherubs. But now what happened? The cherub shrieked with stain. So now the angels are shrieking in pain. What causes the pain? It is the stain. What is the stain? What causes the stain? It is the cruelty and the fear, the pain that they have inflicted on the slaves makes the cherub, the angels, shriek in pain. Okay, seeing the cruelty of the British, the cherubs, the angels are crying. That is a suggestion here. Now he takes us to the lawn, where you find the different parts of the cart, the vehicles, like the axle and the coach wheel. The coach's wheel and axle being buried inside the ground along with the cattle droppings. So there is no human habitation could be found, only the cattle dung, the cow dungs and the other horse dung could be seen on the ground. So the ruining has been in detail explained. So the first 10 lines carries the reader along with them, and he shows the different parts of the ruined mansion where we could see only ruining and scattered things. Hope you understood. Now he comes to the lawn. From the outside the mansion, we are taken to the lawn where the trees are planted. 3 crows flap for the trees and settle, creaking the eucalyptus boughs. The smell of dead limes quicken in the nose the leprosy of empire. Everything again it narrates or describes the leprosy of the empire, ruining of the empire. Leprosy is a disease that disfigures the body. Right here, the colonization, the slavery is the disease that has ruined or disfigured the British Empire. That is the suggestion here. So here he says, 3 crows flap for the trees. Again, the crows are said to be the harbingers, the announcers of the evil that is to come, the doom that is destruction that is going to come. And he describes on the eucalyptus boughs, branches, the crows come and flap their trees. They land on the trees, flapping their wings, and when they sit, the boughs bend. And smell of dead limes. So lemon is again the fruit that the Westerners, the British prefer because the fruit is rich in vitamin C and it helps the Britishers to overcome the common disease that they suffer from. Scurvy. Scurvy is a disease that they suffer very commonly, and vitamin C is said to be the remedy for such a disease. So they plant lime all over their hedges. Their hedges would be filled with this or covered with this lemon trees, and this lemon tree is said to be rotting. Once again, suggesting the rotting of the British Empire, and the smell, rotting smell, comes to your nose when you walk along the ruined mansion along, and you could see the leprosy of the mansion. Leprosy is again the disease that the Britishers are very afraid of, and they maybe the immunity level or they get very easily affected by this particular leprosy causing virus, and they are very scared of this disease. And slavery is said to be this particular virus or bacteria which causes the ruining and the disfiguring of the British mansion. Hope you understood. So from the inside the mansion we came out, we find only cattle dung and the buried wheels, parts of the couches, and we find how the Britishers planted lemon trees around everywhere because it saved them from the disease called scurvy. And then we could find the disfiguring, where the lemon rotting, suggesting the rotting of the British Empire, which is compared to that of the disease leprosy, which disfigures the human body. Just like slavery disfigures the British Empire. Now, suddenly he borrows the words of other lines from Blake's poem Night. Farewell green fields, farewell ye happy groves. So he is talking about giving farewell, and the reference maybe it is to that of the British Empire. When it approached, it bid farewell to the happiness and freedom of the slaves. So the reference is to that, how the British Empire renowned or deprived the natives, especially the slaves, of their happiness and freedom. So green fields and happy grow stands for the freedom and the happiness of the place. And these lines are taken from Blake's poem Night. Comes in Songs of Innocence, I believe. And he then switches on. That's why I told you it's a bit difficult to understand. The single reading will not make things easier for you. From Blake, he switches on to another thought. He goes to Greece. And marble like Greece, like Faulkner's South in stone, deciduous beauty prospered and is gone. But there the lawn breaks in a rash of trees. A spade below dead leaves will wring the bone of some dead animal or human thing fallen from evil days, from evil times. So here the reference is to the Greek construction, which is mostly made with the help of marble. Marble decorates the buildings of Greece, and just like that, he is talking about the mansion of Britain is made up of the thick, very very strong thing like marble, like Faulkner's Southern stone. Reference is to that of William Faulkner, who is from South America, and his writings shows his hatred for his own race. He is also undergoing the same kind of ambivalence, the mixed feelings towards the country in which he is born, just like our poet Walcott. Walcott also undergoes his ambivalence just like Faulkner, and he writes that in his poem. So the reference is to his own self. Just like Faulkner, he also is undergoing a kind of a dichotomy or a conflict in his mind regarding the love he has for the British. Though he loves them, he doesn't approve of the slave trade that they are encouraging. And the mansion is said to be having a deciduous beauty. Deciduous forest, you would have heard, the trees that shed leaves during the autumn season. So here the beauty of the colonial mansion is also falling down. Once it prospered, but now it is falling down and is gone. Now it is no more. But where the lawn breaks in a rash of trees, a spade below dead leaves will bring the bone. But though it has gone, you go and put the spade. Spade is a gardening instrument to dig into the ground. When you dig the ground, you find beneath the leaves filled ground, you could find dead animal, the bones of the dead animal or human thing. So both human beings and animals were treated equally brutally by the white masters. So human thing here refers to the slaves who were treated very brutally by the English masters. And you put a spade into the ground and you could find the spade touches into the bones of the animals and the human being, suggesting that they were treated brutally like that of the animals. Slaves were treated brutally like that of the animal. They have fallen from the evil days, from evil times. The evil days and evil times refers to the 18th, 19th century slave trade was flourishing. When slave trade was flourishing, 18th and 19th century are notorious for the slave trade, when the black people were employed for carrying out all the duties, especially in the plantation textile industries and all. The slaves were employed and they were very cruelly treated. So evil days, evil times is also, the line is inspired by Milton's Paradise Lost. So you could find his love for Faulkner, his love for Blake, William Blake, his love for Milton coming in all these lines, and that too very abruptly. Now, as we move on, we find it seems that the original crops were live. So once again, there is a reference to the lemon trees grown in that silt that clogs the river's skirts. The imperious rakes are gone. The imperious rakes refers to the arrogant British men of fashion. The river flows, obliterating hurt. I climbed a wall with the grill ironwork of exiled craftsmen protecting the great house from guilt perhaps, but not from worm's friend, nor from padded cavalry of the mouse. And when a wind shook in the limes, I heard what Kipling heard, the death of the great empire, the abuse of ignorance by Bible and by sword. Once again, he's taking us inside the temple along the lawn. So we could find the lemon trees occupying the lawn, and they are grown in a very fertile land, silt that clogs the river's cut on the border of the river. You call that to be a very fertile place, right? Along the alluvial soil, in that the lemon trees have been planted, and the lemon trees, they have the quality of rottening the ground, just like the British Empire rotted the native Africa. The lemon, which were the national or the much sought after trees of the British, were also rotting the ground. And the imperious rate, the British men might have gone, the colonization might have had a fall, and the bright girls gone, their girls might have turned to ashes, as has been referred to in the first stanza. But now what flows on the river continues to flow on, obliterating hurt. When you look at, you may not find the hurt that they have created, the ruin that they have created visibly on the river bed, but it might have been carried away. But when you climb the wall within the grill iron, so he is once again taking, maybe the open land doesn't show any symptoms of the ruin, but when you go into the mansion crossing the ironwork, the reference is to the cherub god at in the gate. When you get along, maybe you cannot see the guilt, but you can never escape from the worms that rend the house. Now the worms here stands for something that rottens. So maybe the slave trade has again been referred to here, and they are said to be the worms that rotten the building. You cannot, that had rendered, that had taken its residence in the particular mansion. And the padded cavalry of the mouse. Cavalry is a British term, the group of soldiers marching. So here you could find only the worms and the mouse making their cavalry. They are ruling the house. That could be seen from guilt perhaps, but not from the worm's men, not from the padded cavalry of the mouse. And when a wind shook in the lines, I heard what Kipling heard. So what happens? You may not see anything except the worms and the mouse. Once again talking about the dilapidation, the ruining. But he says when the wind rustles along the rotting lemon trees, you could hear what Kipling heard. So here the reference is to Rudyard Kipling's book, The Decline of the British Empire, where he was predicting the fall of the English Empire. So the reference is to that. When the wind blows in, he could very well hear the destruction or the fall of the British Empire. Reference is to the fall of the British Empire. And he's talking about how the British came into this island of Caribbean. Most of the parts of Caribbean islands were colonized, and how did they manage to get in? They used two tools. They are the Bible, the religion and the military force had been used as a tool to exploit the innocent and ignorant natives. So he says they came in, flourished in the Caribbean islands with the help of the two weapons called religion and the military force, and but they have dilapidated, ruined with the slave trade that they have practiced. And you could hear the ruin in the wind that blows in, just like Kipling heard it, and he has registered that, recorded that in his book, The Fall of the British Empire. If understood, the reference is once again to an English writer, Rudyard Kipling, whom he seems to like. A green lawn broken by low walls of stone, tipped to the rivulet and pacing, I thought next of men like Hawkins, Walter Raleigh, Drake, ancestral murderers. Note the point, ancestral murders. The poet and poets more perplexed in memory now by very ulcerous crime. So the reference here, the green lawn broken by the low walls of stone. Once again, he comes out, the lawn being broken and turned into stones, the trees being ruined and rottening, and dipped to the rivulet. Rivulet is a small river, and along the river he's pacing, walking. And I thought next of Menley Hawkins. While he was walking along the rivulet, the small stream, he thought of people like Hawkins, Walter Raleigh, and Drake. The Hawkins and Drake were the first slave traders, and they were referred to as the ancestral murderers, one who killed the ancestry of the poet, Derek Walcott, the slaves. And poet is a reference to Walter Raleigh, who alone is a poet, not Hawkins and Drake are poets. Only Walter Raleigh is a poet, and those two are the murderers and poets. He thought about people who brought in this slave trade into this British Empire. So he's thinking about it in memory now by every ulcerous crime. They were like the ulcer eating into the British mansion. So they were the murderers. The world's green age then was rotting lime, whose stench became the charnel galleons next. So galleons are the ships. They came by the ship and they colonized the land, rotting it. The rot remains with us. The Menna came. The people who came by the galleon. Galleon is a ship. They came by the ship and they formed colonies. They have gone, rotting everything. And what is left now is the rotting. Men are gone. But as dead ash is lifted in a wind, that fans the blackening ember of the mind, my eyes burn from the ashen throes of done. So what happened here? They are gone, and when he looks at the ruin, it is like the fanning of the fire. You know, the only ash remains, but you fan it. When the wind comes and blows at it, the embers would come into its full force. So the burning of the poet is awakened when he sees the dilapidation everywhere. That fans a blackening ember of the mind. The anger that is suppressed within him comes out when he sees the ruining. And my eyes burn from the ashen prose of Donne. So again, the reference is to John Donne, his ashen poetry, where he talks about that everyone is connected. So he says that thought that everyone is connected comes to his mind when he looks at it, and his heart is burning alive with the anger for the British. Hope you understood. As I told you, the reference is to be Sir John Hawkins, the first Englishman to become a slave trader. Walter Raleigh is a writer, the poet, as well as the favorite of Queen Elizabeth. Sir Francis Drake is again, they're the knights who protected the British Empire and who inflicted slave trade into this. John Donne's ashen poetry has been referred to in the previous stanza. I told you that. We are continuing with the poem. Ablaze with rage, I thought some slave is rotting in this manorial lake. Manorial lake, lake that flows nearby the manor. Manor is a huge mansion. Ablaze with rage, I thought some slave is rotting in this manorial lake, but still the coal of my compassion fought that Albion, who too once was a colony like us, heart of the continent, peace of the main, nook shortened, brook overblown, deranged by foaming channels and the vain expense of bitter fraction. Ablaze with rage. My heart was burning with rage, and I thought some slave is rotting in this manorial lake. When you dig into the lake, you can find some slave is rotting. The body of the slave has been buried there, and the body is rotting. And I could find that if I put a spade into it. But still, the whole of my compassion fought. Again, the mixed feelings. Ambivalence, I told you in the beginning of the poem. One side, he's feeling a rage against the British. Another side, just burning with compassion. The Albion. Albion is the name of the white race. So the Great Britain was also once a colony like us. They were also undergoing colonization from the Romans. The reference is to the Romans who colonized them once. They also came by ship and they occupied and formed colonies in the British Great Britain. So they were also once a colony like us, part of the continent, piece of the main. So the reference is to Asian poetry where he says, no man is an island, everyone is a part of the whole. So everyone is connected. This thought has been taken from John Donne, the metaphysical poet, who talks in ancient prose how everyone is connected. No man is an island. It's a very popular quote that we use. Everyone is connected. So everyone is a piece of what Great Britain. What he's trying to say is what Great Britain is now trying to impose on the colonies now, including Africa and the Caribbean island, was once experienced by them. So we have to have some compassion. They also underwent the same slavery and the same kind of abuse, and now they are when throwing it on us. So we should look at it with compassion. By forming channels, but through sea they came, way in expense of bitter faction. Faction is the power. Roman used power. They came by the sea and used power over the British. So we should have some compassion. They are not the only ones who abuse the colonized people. They were once colonized, and we have to understand that. We should have some compassion. So the poem ends like this: all in compassion ends. So he ends the poem with this compassion. He tries to understand why the British is behaving so badly. He says, all in compassion ends, so differently from what the heart arranged, as well as if manner of thy friends. So the lines conclude the total mood of the poem, saying that everything ends in compassion. When you look at the British, you can understand it is something that they themselves, this plight has been experienced by then, so differently from the heart arranged, as well as if a manner of their friend. Killing a human being so differently from what the heart arranged. She says that the wounds that are created by the colonizer, they still remain, and it is equivalent to that of the wound that they themselves have undergone. So what everything is now equivalent. Everything is now equivalent, and he says that so it is that all in compassion ends so differently from what the heart arranged. So his heart is undergoing different emotions. I told you, no, anger is there, compassion is there, but finally which takes over him is the compassionate side, as well as if a manner of thy friends. So he says so differently from what the heart arranged, as well as if a manner of thy friends. So he says any death diminishes everyone living. So whether it is the white who are killed or the black who are killed, everyone who gets killed invokes the same kind of a loss. So it is like the manner of their friends. If the destruction of the you cannot rejoice. What he tries to conclude is that you cannot rejoice in the destruction of your friend. You cannot, and maybe he's trying to tell himself, though he is happy that the slave trade has come to an end with the destruction or the ruin of the great mansion, the British Empire, he cannot rejoice in that because today it is the British Empire. But once they were also colonized, and it takes them back to the Roman colonization or invasion of the British Empire. So everyone suffers. So he says that you don't rejoice in the fall of the British Empire, which is your friends. So he calls them as friends. You cannot rejoice in the manner of thy friend, destruction of the manor, the mansion of your friends, referring to the British Empire. So he is telling his heart, which is torn apart for twin feelings, saying that you don't rejoice with the destruction, though you feel sorry for your natives, don't rejoice at the fall of the British Empire because it is your friends. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to everyone. And once again, the reference is to that of Donne's Asian poetry, where the poet says that no one is an island. Everyone is interconnected. So don't rejoice in the destruction of anyone is the message that the poet wants to give through this concluding lines. So when you look at the poem in the nutshell, as I have already told you, there is no rhyme scheme, there is no particular stanza form being followed. It's written in free verse. The lines run into one another, they end abruptly, quotations comes all of a sudden, making it all a difficult reading. But this house presents the reader that with vivid imagery. There are so many images that comes on the way. The rotting lime, leprosy, everything talks about the ruining state. And as I told you, Great Mansion is a metaphor for the British Empire, the colonizer and his empire. And it talks about the history of power and domination and the abuse of the local and the global scale. So what happened? It is talking about the British, who were forming colony. They were the global power, and it is enforced upon the poor local slaves. The poem talks about that. and there is anger, there is compassion, and finally there is an acknowledgement. Yes, slave trade is something that is unjust, but we have to understand that we should not rejoice in the destruction of someone else. So though there is ruining, you should not rejoice. He's telling himself that you have to be compassionate to something that dies, even if it has given you some pain, because pain is something that everyone experiences. Even the British has experienced in the hands of the Romans. So finally, he says everyone suffers in this world, and you should have compassion, and you should not rejoice in the ruin. Hope you understood. Listen to the poem once again, and we watch the video once again. If you are not able to follow it with one, watch. Thank you, girls. Hope you understood. Thank you very much.